Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Goodie Nation podcast. I am your host, Casey, and I know probably every episode I say we have a very special guest today, and it's true, but today's episode in particular, we have a very special guest. We have Kathleen Kurre, who is legend in her own right, but within the Goodie Nation family and community, definitely someone who we have looked up to, leaned on, has been an instrumental part of a very fascinating 5 years, and has actually just made a transition from formally being a part of Goodie Nation, but like she's always going to be a part of the group. And so, Kathleen, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is lots of fun. So, Casey, I always love being with you, and we always have lots of fun. So
we do. It's
go.
Yes, and we were talking earlier, like, how has this not happened already? But better late than never. Better late than never. So this week we are exploring the ways that ecosystem builders have sort of found ways to become the plug, to become the person that people tap into for resources and guidance. And I would kind of love to start with that origin story. Kathleen, how do you become the person you are right now?
Golly, through the grace of the divine, actually. It's the only way to explain it. So, I grew up in Middle Indiana in Richmond, Indiana, in the cornfields, and, got through high school and then found my way to Purdue up in West Lafayette. And I was an honors math student, and it was a long time ago. And as I found out later as an adult, I was being in the honors program, I was in a special one-of-a-kind program where we were going to learn calculus and computers all at the same time. Now, mind you, this is really hard to believe. To have a calculator like we have today would have cost us like $50 because calculators were brand new. And in that moment, I went to my first calculus class. There were 14 of us in the room. All my new guy friends, because Purdue was mostly guys, all went off to the engineering campus to, rooms of 200 where they were going to learn calculus. And the professor comes in and says, we're going to do something. We're going to teach you calculus and computers all at the same time. And this was at a time when calculus, unlike when my daughter was in high school, was not taught at all in high school. And from that day forward, coming to this point started. And basically, we were at the leading and the bleeding edge of innovation and learning how to. So for calculus, I started learning computer programming when I was 18 years old. And high school students, professors, children were teaching me how to code. We all had a big old time. I was the only woman in the room. And this opened up a whole wonderful universe of doing modeling, from economic systems to bus routes to earthquakes to all kinds of things. And I just didn't know any better. And because this is what I did. I would later come to find out Howard Gardner wrote a really wonderful book called The Seven Intelligences. The math intelligence is one of the seven. And what a math person does, and with the math intelligence, is we look for patterns and we look and understand how life is connected and how all different variables are connected. So you could fast forward to Goodie Nation and working with tech founders. I would always ask them about their unit economics model in terms of the variables, in terms of their business and what variables moved what, so that they could understand revenue and what the levers were to do to pull revenue, how to do profit margins, and to really be able to model staffing and impact and all of those kinds of things. So I do that now, just sort of with just that's basically who I am. I'm innovation. It started then. I do things that haven't really been done before. So I worked for Kentucky Fried Chicken, worked for a bank in Louisville, Kentucky, and put code in the first ATM systems. And we still have that issue today in terms of new technology, whatever it is. We knew we could build an ATM. We knew that we could program an ATM. What we didn't know is, would anybody show up, and how long would it take them to show up? And if the code that we had built in order to use the ATM, if they would even understand it. So that's a wonderful thing about life, which is so many things change, but also so many things really stay the same in terms of who we are as humans, how we learn, how we adapt, and really the life that we came here to live. So one of the things that is kind of fascinating is that I was in the tech department. I was the only team member on a team that we were doing capacity planning, because the bank had bought a $2 million computer, and in 6 months they were out of capacity. So we built all of that so that we could know how the computer was being used. And then I got to be a correspondent banking calling officer. So little did I know that I would be a salesperson. I would build tech companies on the sales side, but the banking world taught me everything that I needed to know about sales and relationships, and how it really, what it takes to get technology into big organizations. And so I got to travel Western Kentucky, which was really cool. And the story, when I see me, I laugh to keep myself humble, because I came out of the tech department where I talked to people, but then all of a sudden I got a new car, a Monte Carlo. I had a credit card. I had a recorder. We didn't have phones back then. And I drove down to Hopkinsville, Kentucky for my first call. And I had been introduced by the fellow who had the territory before me. And I sat in my car and I cried. And I said, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to turn the car around. I'm going to drive back I-65 from Hopkinsville up to Louisville. And I'm going to turn it all in and say, give me my systems desk back. And like so many of us, and it's happened to all of us, there's a little voice inside my head. Well, it wasn't even a voice. The last thing I remember was I was opening the car door and I was getting out and shaking. I walk in the bank and go to the receptionist, and she ushered me into the bank's president's foyer. And I met the president of the bank, and I said, and he saw that I was visibly shaken. I hadn't turned 30 yet. And he said, calm down. You know a lot about technology. I don't. I know a lot about banking that you don't know. You teach me, and I'll teach you. And it was one of the strongest bits of advice in terms of us being human beings and walking into stuff that we've never done before, and taking that big step and being and just trusting, what's happening and all that. So I ended up going from the bank to working in the executive office of KPMG in New York, between the banking and tech practice. I then came back and came back to Louisville, got married, had my daughter, and found myself working at Humana, putting in first generation physician office systems. And that was so we could build the tech, but we didn't know if anybody in the office, the doctors or the nurses or anybody, could even use it. And so it was not only training on tech, it was training on how to move people from doing what they were doing, which was all paper and folders and all that, and to start using technology and to use it in a new way. Eventually, Humana got out of that business, and someone came knocking on my door. Actually, it was a VP in finance, and said, we're starting a venture capital group. He said, we don't have anybody we're already doing venture capital investing. It was the EVP of Humana and the VP, and he said, we're going to hire a full-time person, and we want you to be that person. I went, what is venture capital? And back in those days, an entrepreneur literally was the person down the street who owned the tire store. And he told me what it was and saw my background in terms of modeling. And I had done a lot of financial modeling when I was at the bank. I actually, as a rising senior, I was on a team for a naval think tank in Washington, D.C., where we modeled carriers to keep them safe in the Pacific Ocean. He said, you could do this. So I said, okay. And that opened my world. We didn't have any of the kinds of things we have today in terms of customer discovery and how you do this and all of that. We were just doing it. And this was actually in the late 80s. So it was really new. It was one of the most fun jobs I've ever had, watching dog trials for artificial hearts and labs at UC San Diego building, looking and creating um, um, the cures for diabetes inside the pancreas. And so all of that was happening, and I was having a great time. But there's also something, and this is one of the things for us as individuals, is always listen to that voice in the back of your head. And I basically said, well, I know all of this stuff, but it looks like if you want to build a company that you need to know something about sales. And I didn't have that in my resume. And so I shifted and took on a sales group, a young sales group for a big insurance company. We sold boutique financial products on Wall Street. And then one of the businesses and one of the startups that came out of Humana got funded. And they needed, and the guy I worked for at Humana was the person who was the CEO. And he said, come and do sales for me and for us. And we had $20,000 worth of revenue. And I was the 13th person on the team. 5-6 years later, I built the sales revenue line to $35-40 million. We had 350 people on the team. We sold it, had an exit, and then all kinds of things started happening from there. I found myself in Atlanta, and her dad and I split, and so I came to Atlanta to restart a clinical database company that had gone through $7 million. I raised another 7-8 until the .com hit. So I know the kinds of things that we're going through now, which is one day you've got a company. Our lead investor was the bridge, and his fund collapsed in around him. So all of that, and it's now like, what do I do? Well, the origin stories. Little did I know that there was this whole other part of me that wanted to be heard and understood. And I found myself on a big birthday going to India for the second time, and got to travel around to many of the very Buddhist spiritual places. And actually, when my friends and I were leaving Dharamsala and the plane landed, the Dalai Lama came out and basically came over to speak to us for like 15-20 minutes and shook our hands. And we were the only light-skinned people in the airport in the Himalayas in Dharamsala. And I thought, well, there's something else going on here. So I knew the call, and I said, I know what I know, but there's more. And I could see how the world worked. And so this embarked a whole part of my life where I ended up traveling the world. I got a master's of divinity and spiritual peacemaking. I actually then was back in Atlanta, and Terry Blum, who was the dean of the Schiller Business School at that time, asked me to come on the faculty. So to teach leadership, which I called leading from the outside in and the inside out, and then also to run this campus-wide business plan competition. And back then, entrepreneurship was all being done in the business school. There's no CreateX or any of that. And it gave me the opportunity to really kind of work with students, and found a great love in terms of teaching and teaching other people, how to build their companies. And then and I thought that was great. I loved being on the faculty at Georgia Tech until I ran into a fellow that interviewed me for a job when I first moved to Atlanta. And he actually was one of the co-founders, still is, Scott Geller of TechBridge, which is a nonprofit, technology nonprofit here in Atlanta that does technology for other nonprofits, i.e. small to medium-sized nonprofits. So, in the nonprofit world, we got big nonprofits and large corporations. They do their tech because big companies know what they want to do. They've got their ICP. They've got all these things that we talk about. And nonprofits who are small to medium-sized, they really don't have anything, and they don't really know. And so I said, yeah, gosh, I've just learned about compassion. So let me in. I was teaching some social entrepreneurship at Tech, and said, well, I've never done it, so let's go do it. And I did that for 3 years, got us through the 2008 financial crisis, and then it was time to turn it over to to the next person who the person following me was a CEO that was really a CTO. And by that time, my tech skills were really not there in terms of I knew how to run companies, but not how to be a CTO. And from that, I found my way back into tech startups. And it's just been one of the loves of my life, because in that when we're a founder and when we're in a tech startup, and the reason why I love teaching entrepreneurship at Georgia Tech is because an entrepreneur is creating something that without that individual, it would not exist. So in terms of my divinity degree, creating new is really a high spiritual principle for me. And what we're doing is we're taking something that is not known out of whole cloth, as they say, and step by step, we're creating it. And artists have a canvas and paints and maybe, paper. Musicians have pianos and notes. They have the blank sheet as a canvas. We as entrepreneurs, as tech startups, the business is our canvas that we're creating something that has not yet existed and would not exist without us. Strawberry jam company, a big tech company, a healthcare company, the small business down the street. So I found my way I was asked to come and be the first program director at Digital Undivided, and created a 9-month incubator for Black and Latinx women founders. At that point, I got to take both what I knew about building a business and customer discovery and all that, and got to create something that we call the Confident Founder Program. The term is by Digital Undivided, that we could actually walk with the founders through the emotional journey. It's hard enough being a woman. It's even harder being a woman, a mom, and a startup founder. And we don't always realize all the different cultural things that we take in terms of we can do and what we can't do and where our fears are and things. So I did that, and then actually was one of the architects of a group here in Atlanta that we did for 18 months, created a higher education peace studies initiative across 10 Atlanta colleges, universities, both research universities everywhere from, Georgia Tech and Georgia State to Emory to Agnes Scott to Morehouse School of Medicine to Morehouse, and it was really wonderful. And by that time, Joey and I knew each other from a business plan competition at Georgia Tech. Interestingly enough, we were both judges. So Joey's path and my path crossed, and he said, "Come help." And that's what I started doing five years ago. First, walking with founders, and usually walking with, I worked with some with pre-seed founders, but mostly with seed founders and seed plus founders. At least what I know, 3 of the founders that have gone through these huddles that I got to work with have moved into a Series A. And then last year, Joey asked me if I would, help with the performance partners and being head of accountability and performance. I know how to run stuff. So Joey reminded me this week that I first said no. I like being a performance partner. And then I thought about it and told him I would, and came back after further reflection and noted that, that it was something that I can do, because that's one of the things I love to do, is take things from where they are and walk as we create them together. And that's what I've been doing at Goodie Nation. And it's been absolutely wonderful. That's what I realize I've been doing all of my life. And what I would say to everybody listening is that 18-year-old walking into Purdue University from Richmond, Indiana, could not have known that this is the life that she came here to live, and of all the wonderful pieces of life and how they're all put together, and how we as individuals get to create that life one step at a time. And with what I like to say is with our minds, yes, with our bodies, yes, because they take us around the world, but also with our emotions and with our spirits. And that's where I am today. So Casey, back to you.
Kath, I mean, this isn't a competition, but that may have been the most insane origin story that has ever told on this program. And I guess my follow-up to that, I mean, clearly, like, you have all this talent and you were doing innovative things back before, you know, a lot of women were in the space, but like people in general knew what they were. I mean, you clearly could have just focused your entire career on like making money and just going and getting the next thing. You've touched on it a little bit, but like, why? Because the theme this week is the plug. Like, why is it important for you to not just use these talents that you have to like go and get yours, but to also help other people potentially go and get theirs?
Well, that's a depth question, and the question with that is that, and since I'm a certified astrologer, I wanted to know sort of, you know, I believe in the Greek wisdom as above, so below, and how all of that is connected. And I would say that how I came into this lifetime, I am a Pisces sun sign, and the Pisces is the ocean, and the Pisces is both the surface where it's all wavy. And the Pisces is the layers that go down into the ocean, and finally at the base of the ocean, you know, all rivers flow into a Pisces. So I had to come to an understanding, having grown up in the all-male world. I was usually, if not always, the only woman at the table. I learned how to develop my own intuitive skills and how to really use them, but I didn't know what I was really developing. And so we don't really know. And what fun it is for me is to walk with everybody as we are in our own unique places and watch what everybody's path is. And I think that at this point in my life, I'm really here to walk with people to create a world that we all want to live in. And I've been have done a lot of studying about, you know, the opposites, you know, night and day, life and death, all that sort of thing, and the paradoxes of life. And you know, one of the things that we don't often talk about our careers are all the times that things did not turn out. And I've got a lot of those stories too. And you know, one of the stories is that after we sold Healthcare Recoveries, our CEO went to work for the parent company, and then I became CEO, and you know, got to take it into its next stage, which was really exciting. And then one day I was called to Atlanta. That's where the home headquarters were, and we knew that our parent company was in financial problems, and they had acquired a lot of companies. And the CEO of our parent company said, "We're going to sell TechBridge, and not TechBridge, Healthcare Recoveries, and we're bringing the CEO back, and here are your options." And so there are times in our life that life throws big rocks on us and creates lots and lots and lots of friction. And the question is, are we going to stand in that and really understand that that's part of the growth process? And so I learned, and even in the early my life stories growing up in Richmond, Indiana, is that life brings us a lot of things. And so for as much wealth many times of my life that has been created, you know, that wealth through the .com, for example, evaporated, a lot of it in one day, in 1 minute, in 1 hour. So there's a natural way that our spirits in life helps us build wisdoms to say, what is it? And why am I here? And I think those years of sabbatical and learning what I did, I think that a feeling thinking is that it opened me up to what my true purpose is. And don't get me wrong, you know, Fusion Advisors is a for-profit company, and I take clients and, you know, work in all different sorts of ways. And, you know, when I was my daughter's age, and she's not yet 40, you know, I was headstrong in the stream, and it was lots of fun. It is lots of fun, and it's just that one day I woke up after what the Buddhists would call a critical eruption, when my life as I knew it the day before just sort of evaporated around me. That's when I said, I know what I know, but there's more. And that was just the beacon of light that I came in with. And we all have that beacon of light, and we all have epics in our lives as we go through our lives in terms of who we are maturing into. And the insights that I would have today is everything that I went through and all the questions and all the dark nights of the soul brought me here. And just so you know, I have plenty dark nights of the soul still. I have plenty. I'm a human being just like we all are. I still at different times of night wake up with sweats out of fear of different things going on. Of course, they're all in my head, and continue to practice the deep practice of mindfulness, acceptance, and surrender. And that's really a lot of what I did, with founders and their personal lives, and just walking through what it's like to be a founder, because we get to put all of these things together. And yeah, it's quite a wonderful life.
Thank you for that. So speaking of which, as you know, you may not officially be in the capacity of Goodie Nation T-Bibber, but you're never gonna escape us. That sounds morbid. Sorry, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
That's you all know where I am. So that's great.
And that's amazing. And so, you mentioned Fusion Advisors. I would love for anyone who's listening who's like, oh, wait, so how can I too get plugged into this knowledge? How can people find out more about you and what you do?
Thank you for asking that. The best way is to send me an email at Kathleen@fusionadvisors.com. And the reason of that is I used to have a website, and I woke up and nobody went to it, and it didn't matter how many SEO engines I used. And the thing of it is that it's really challenging for me to say this is what I do when there's so many people who are coaches and advisors and this and that and this and this and that. And mostly people, like one of my a kind of contract, if you will, with the divine is that when somebody comes across my door and knocks on it, my role is to say yes. So if this, has a ringing to you, then just send me an email, or go on LinkedIn and send me a message. So I've had the opportunity, even last week, actually, the gym where I work out and been working out there probably for 8 to 10 years is now owned by a couple. And the wife of the couple has a women's group, for example, and they do vision boards, and they do all kinds of wonderful things. And she asked me to come and talk, and I did, and we had a great time. And we'll be working with some of the folks there, and was able to be a coach and a mentor at a recent women's event around AI and in innovation. And part of that was some really, really wonderful conversations about what we're doing here. Also, from the hard business side, what I would tell you from the founders that I've worked with, and I was telling the Goodie Nation team on Monday, a number of them have called and said, or have told me in our one-on-ones, that I ask the hardest questions. So I know a lot about business. I know how to build them. I know I know how to build revenue lines and sales funnels, and it all really has to do with people. And they said, the founders, when CEOs would say, "You ask me the really hard questions," and I make them think, and I make them feel and understand and take a look at things that they might necessarily know, and to help them think about, it's not what I would do, but it's about opening the wisdom, and again, opening this creative exercise. So I was mentioning this with a friend today, is building a company and building your life is like a chemistry lab. in high school, or a biology lab. We go into the class and there's a textbook. This is how you live your life. I mean, I've got probably 2,000 books in my house. And this is how you live your life, and just do this. Just like biology, just like chemistry. Here's how this works, and here's how the interactions work. Well, what happens when you go into your chemistry lab and you just follow it, and things start blowing up? And how many times because I love to cook, do we follow a recipe and it looks nothing like the recipe on the picture, and it doesn't taste very good, but turns out 12, 20 more tries later, we're finally figuring it out. So that's really what I do. It's like this intersection of business, person, soul, journey, and really stepping into who we are. And if it resonates with you, great. Kathleen@fusionadvisors.com, or send me a message in LinkedIn, and we'll take it from there. It's all custom. It's all custom. So
it's boutique. Yes. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm sure that, again, that was a crazy origin story. That was just the abridged version, so I can't even imagine. But yes, we truly appreciate you at Goodie Nation for all that you do. I'm sure the greater Atlanta innovation economy appreciates you for all that you have done, and we're looking forward to seeing all the stuff you're about to do.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it too. There's, sometimes you just look at something, and there's been doing, my writing and artistry that I've been doing sort of on the side. I'm like the one who, does something, and I look at it and go, "You did that? Like what?" So I'm just as interested in seeing what happens as everybody else. So we're going to have fun together.
Amazing. Well, yes. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for coming on the show today. Thank you all for listening. That was a lot. And yes, we will see you the next time.
Okay,
Take it easy.
Awesome. Bye.